clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into SST on Apple Podcast app, Spotify, and on YouTube. You're joined with just me today to tell you something very important about this New York Knicks season, because it's not hyperbolic. It is time to officially look at this New York Knicks team as a real contender in the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to talk about how we need to start making sure we're talking about quarterbacks in the proper manner, because after Lamar Jackson lost in the conference championship game this weekend, I have questions, and I think I have some answers as the proper way to speak on quarterbacks in this NFL of 2024. Subway Sports Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe, rate, review if you like what you've been hearing. Drop a comment on the YouTube or the social media at Subway Sports Talk. But like I said, we're here to talk about the New York Knicks today, and I have to say this and make sure that you know we're not being hyperbolic, we're not being overreactive, and we are thinking about this as we have throughout the entire season with rationale, not swinging for the fences, not going too hard on our own team, but looking at what's in front of us and how this team performed in the month of January and concluding that the Knicks actually are an Eastern Conference contender right now, with moves, without moves, it doesn't matter. And of course, the Julius Randle injury plays into effect here of how they can properly see themselves falling into this Eastern Conference. But right now, my concern is not with Julius Randle's injury, especially with this so far so good news that's come out about the dislocation versus something that was torn or more structural damage, and that he might be back by the end of February. Right? So we're going to kind of put that aside, but I'm going to say, even with the injury, I expect this team to compete night in, night out. They've done it so far, yes, against lesser competition without Julius Randle, but this team is cooking on all cylinders. And despite a few numbers that look a little bit hairy, like their number against teams above 500, that has not been the case thus far since the OG Anunoby trade. Obviously, we've heard about the record for the Knicks in January. They've been the top team in the NBA in January by multiple metrics. Them, the Clippers, and the Cavs. No matter how you skin the cat, those are the top three teams in the NBA right now, and it's easily argued that the Knicks are number one in January. So you might be asking the question, when you say the Knicks are Eastern Conference contenders, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean exactly that they can make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then upon getting there, we know that anything could happen. We've seen teams like the Miami Heat in recent memory make that run, make that push. We've seen teams like the Lakers last year get to a conference championship when they were struggling more so in the regular season. We've seen a Golden State Warriors team who didn't seem like they were at the peak of their powers make it to a finals. We've seen the Celtics year after year after year show up in conference finals and occasionally in NBA finals when they were on the fringe of being the best team in the league. This is really the first time that the Celtics are the true favorite without a worry of a doubt. This team for the Knicks is actually much more similar to some of those early Boston Celtics teams that knocked at the door, made conference final after conference final, and even snuck into an NBA finals here and there. Now, with that all being said, I'm not talking about the Knicks being a favorite to make the NBA finals, to win the NBA finals, to win the Eastern Conference for that matter. But the strides this team has taken, especially after the trade for OG Anunoby, cannot be disregarded. The one big knock on this team that I've made on this podcast, which is a great reason why I feel like I'm not being hyperbolic, is that they were unable to punch up. They are going to take care of business against the smaller dogs in the NBA. As we know, they're 22-1 against teams with an under 500 record. The only one loss against a team under 500 is the Utah Jazz. They were actually above 500 when that game was played, but now they've fallen under, so that counts as a loss, right? The Knicks are taking care of business against the teams they're definitely supposed to beat. Where they've fallen short is against teams above 500, 9-17 against teams above 500. That record, or 9-16, I apologize. That record is a little bit worrisome. That's what would worry you. However, when you dig deeper into it and you look at the picture that's in front of us, you'll realize that a lot of that 9-16 against teams above 500 is not what meets the eye. A lot of it came before the OG Anunoby trade. It came earlier in the year, and it came against teams that you shouldn't be deterred from thinking this team's great because you lost to them. Right now, if you look at those losses against teams above 500, you see 3 losses against the Boston Celtics. 1 was the first game of the year, and all of them were prior to December 8th. 1-3 right now against the Milwaukee Bucks. All of them were prior to the OG Anunoby trade. They have 1 loss to the Cavs, 2 losses to the Magic, 1 loss to the Thunder, who are a top seed in the Western Conference, a loss to the Mavs that was a heartbreaker after the trade, one of their only losses in January, a loss to the Pacers December 30th, where they were shorthanded without OG, because it was before the trade officially transferred over, and without Quickly and without Barrett. They also lost the one to Utah, like I mentioned, was their only loss against a team under 500. Those are the losses we're talking about here. So if you're going to be deterred from thinking the Knicks are an actual contender in the Eastern Conference, I ask you to make sure you pin your eyes on the 3 losses against Boston and the 3 losses against Milwaukee. 6 losses right there, all before the trade for OG Anunoby, all against top dogs in the Eastern Conference. You need to see how this team stacks up against those teams, of course, for them to be a true Eastern Conference contender. But we already know they can kind of stack up against the Bucks, and the Celtics are kind of a different beast right now. But the big point why I believe this is now possible for the New York Knicks, whereas I didn't think it was as sure of a thing, and it's still not a sure thing, right? Let's be clear. But I didn't think it was as sure of a thing or as sure as a possibility a few weeks ago, is because I still looked at this team as a 4th seed at best. Well, right now at 31-17 after the January they just had, they sit in 3rd place, ahead of the Philadelphia 76ers, a team who they took care of business against earlier in January with Joel Embiid playing. And now with Joel Embiid inching closer to this game total or lack thereof that he's accruing over this season, making him likely ineligible for the MVP and postseason awards, I raised the question about Joel Embiid playing much of the rest of this season. I think he'll play a lot of it. I think when he's healthy, he's going to go out there and ball out. He's a monster. We know this. But if he isn't going to be eligible for those awards, it would behoove the Philadelphia 76ers to rest this man a little bit. It would behoove Joel Embiid and that entire organization to make sure he's full go, full health, ready to rock in the playoffs. Because right now, Joel Embiid and the Sixers team, yes, on paper, a lot of people would still put them ahead of the Knicks. And I get that. I wouldn't argue too harshly with anybody who would say the Sixers are the 3rd-ranked team in the East. I ain't doing that. But if we sit here and say that they're the 3rd team in the East, let's also sit here and remind ourselves they haven't gotten out of a 2nd round with Joel Embiid. To think like they're a sure thing for an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, to think like they are the team that's much better than the Knicks when it comes to the playoffs, that is something I will not subscribe to. Right now, we've seen it. Only 1 game, but we've seen the Knicks at full strength and the Sixers at full strength face off. Knicks dominated. The Knicks can beat the Sixers. But the key to the Knicks getting that 3rd seed is the way this thing all falls out. If you end up in the 4-5 matchup in that first round, whether you're taking on the Cavs or the Sixers or the Heat, Pacers, Magic, whoever it may be, not going to be a easy series by any stretch of the imagination. All those teams are good. All those teams have star players. But if you're in that matchup, the 4-5, what that unfortunately leads you to is a matchup in the 2nd round against the Boston Celtics. Now, call me scared, but I don't want to see the Boston Celtics at all, let alone in the 2nd round. They're the best team in the East. They're the best team in the NBA right now. When you watch a Boston Celtics game, you see people coming at you from all angles, especially when Porzingis is healthy. So the key for the Knicks being the 3rd seed is possibly avoiding Boston until round 3. We know the Milwaukee Bucks have flaws right now. They just fired their coach last week. Their defense has been abysmal when they've been a team that is known for a strong defense for years now. They're going back to some different things. Doc Rivers has a history of coaching up some good defenses. Doc Rivers also has a history, quite like Joel Embiid in the playoffs, where he blows series that he should be winning. So if you ask me if I'm scared of the Bucks, a little bit. Scared of Giannis. Scared if Middleton becomes 2020 Middleton, 2021 Middleton. But scared of the Bucks overall? I'm not saying that. Not with the way this Knicks team competes. Not with the way that they play defense. I'm going to go through some stats in a second here. But the difference in facing Milwaukee possibly in round 2, or the Heat in round 2, or the Cavs, Sixers, or Pacers or Magic, whatever it may be, versus facing the Celtics in round 2 is a massive win. The Knicks actually securing a 3rd seed into the playoffs will exponentially increase their odds to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I don't know about you Knicks fans out there. I don't know about you basketball fans out there. Some people might sit here and say that's not enough. The Knicks need to be a championship contender. That sounds great to me. I would love that. But right now, the way the Knicks have built things over the past few years under Leon Rose, Tom Thibodeau, now Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, and etc. Do you know how thrilling it is to watch a team night in, night out have an absolute chance to win? To look at the standings and expect to see the New York Knicks in the top 4? To look forward to playoff basketball because you have a absolute great chance of your team competing in the playoffs? That's an absolute win. And I'm not just calling it quits after that win. I think this team has a chance. I think the way they match up with Philly is great. I think the way they match up with Milwaukee is pretty great. Because right now I look at Milwaukee and I watched almost that entire second half when they took on the Nuggets last week, or two nights ago. Their defense got issues. Jamal Murray went wherever he wanted, let alone Nikola Jokic. Obviously, the Knicks don't have a Jokic. Nobody's got a Jokic. But that issue with their guards playing defense is real. And Giannis isn't making up for it right now. Middleton's not making up for it right now. Brooke Lopez ain't making up for it. Bobby Portis ain't making up for it. The Bucks are gettable. The Sixers are gettable. The Celtics, you'll be a big-time underdog for good reason. But if the Knicks can secure that, which I think they're going to play well enough without Julius Randle in February here, which I'll get to that in a second too, to possibly be in position. And again, this Joel Embiid thing with the postseason awards having this strict game limit. Again, if you're not familiar with this, players need to play 65 games in the regular season to be eligible for postseason awards, which means that Joel Embiid can only miss 5 more games this year to be eligible for MVP. And like I said before, it behooves the Sixers to not have Embiid striving for MVP. Because last year, and frankly every year, he's plummeted in the playoffs. He's absolutely a top 5 player in the league. Absolutely. In the playoffs, he's gone down, down, down. Field goal percentage in the dumps. Second round, bye-bye. That's it. So if you ask me if I'm scared of any Eastern Conference teams, I say absolutely the Boston Celtics. But I do not say I'm scared of the Milwaukee Bucks, Sixers, Magic, Heat, Pacers, Cavs. Not scared. Knicks are right there, if not better. And this is now shown out over time. Let's go through some of the stats. We already went through the record stuff. 22-1 against teams below 500, 9-16 against teams above 500. That's not great, but we broke down some of those losses and how reasonable some of those are and how many of them came before the OG Anunoby trade, where this team is now a different team. The way they played defense was already good. Now it's better. The way they space the ball out and score is now better. Guys like Dante DiVincenzo doing more better than RJ Barrett. They do need to figure out some things, and I did a whole podcast last week about who they should go for as far as trade targets. I ended up on Malcolm Brogdon as my lead target. So I'm not saying this team's perfect. This team's good. Least points per game allowed in the Eastern Conference. Second least points per game allowed in the entire NBA. The third best point differential or net rating, whatever you want to call it, in the Eastern Conference. Tied for fourth with the Clippers in the entire NBA. Those losses, 6 of them to the top 2 seeds in the East. 2 more of them to the top 2 seeds in the West. Is that something we're going to be really upset about? Not to me. I want to see them punch up. They did. They beat the Wolves. They beat the Sixers. They beat the Heat. They beat the Denver Nuggets. They're punching up nowadays. Right now, they're 7th in points per 100 possession and 7th in opponents' points per 100 possession. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, they like the Knicks as well. There's something called, you might have heard about it, Pythagorean theorem, right? Not talking about math. We ain't talking geometry here. But that's an advanced statistic using all sorts of things, net rating, strength of schedule, margin of victory, all that various things. And what it does is give you an indication if there's a team who is overperforming what they should have been doing. Do they have more wins than they should have? Do they have less wins than they should have? For example, if you see a team that has only 22 wins in the regular season, but their Pythagorean says that they're 29, 30 wins projected, that means they're probably getting a little bit unlucky. Now, if you see a team with 30 wins in the regular season and only 24 wins on the Pythagorean, I'm sorry, that was the opposite. I think you get the idea. If the Pythagorean is as high or below, now I'm confusing myself. That's what happens when we talk geometry on the podcast. However, the point of the matter is the advanced metrics here for Pythagorean theorem, they indicate that the Knicks are basically right on track. The Knicks have 30 wins. Their Pythagorean says that they should have 32, which means they've actually won a few less games than the advanced analytics are portraying. Maybe they should have pulled out one of those games against Orlando. They should have. Maybe they should have pulled out that game against Dallas. They should have. They easily could have been undefeated in January, right? So who are the other teams in this range? Who are the other teams that the Knicks are stacking up against when it comes to Pythagorean theorem? Is this a fluke? Again, it's not the be-all, end-all, but it's a indication of success, and if it's proper or a bit lucky. Pythagorean has the Celtics, Thunder, Knicks, 1, 2, 3. The teams surrounding them, the Sixers, Clippers, Timberwolves, Nuggets, and Bucks. All of those teams you would undoubtedly say are the best teams in the NBA right now. And the Knicks happen to be above a bunch of those. So overall, in total record, total wins, the Knicks end up about 7th right now based off their winning percentage. But the advanced metrics are adding up to say they could be even better than that. So all this stuff about them not punching up, to this point, I understand some of the tough losses. I understand not beating Boston yet this year, and maybe they won't. But the way they're currently constituted to go through the rest of this season, they have a chance to lock in the 3 seed. And they absolutely have a chance against any team in the East that's not named the Boston Celtics. And if they are number 3, they have a great line to the conference finals. And from there on out, we know what can happen. We've seen the Heat do it. This team's not that different from some of those Miami Heat teams in the past 3 or 4 years that have made an NBA Finals. Play hard-nosed, impressive defense every night. Rebound the hell out of the ball. They have the first offensive rebounding rate in the league, 7th defensive rebounding rate in the league. Projects them top 3 total rebounding rate. This team finishes possessions. This team gives themselves extra possessions. And the way Jalen Brunson has been playing on top of this, so without Randle, being around for possibly another month plus, what has Jalen Brunson been doing? Absolutely carrying. Absolutely putting great performance after great performance. Dante DiVincenzo, great performance after great performance. Different guys doing more and more stuff. Precious Achiuwa showing up. Josh Hart, triple-double last night. Miles McBride shooting the lights out, playing great defense. This team has enough balance. They could use some more depth, especially in that ball handler situation off the bench. Absolutely. But Jalen Brunson right now is not just having a good season, he's having a great season. You look at win shares across the league. Jalen Brunson is ranked 8th in the entire NBA in win shares. A statistic that greatly favors bigs, greatly favors people who are great defenders around the rim and who finish possessions with rebounds. I love win shares. I often use it to check myself. If I'm seeing something good on the screen, and then I go to the stats and that also says the same thing, I think I'm watching the right stuff, right? So who surrounds him? The top 3 or top 5 guys in the league right now make a ton of sense for the most part. You got Nikola Jokic, number 1, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 2, Giannis, 3, Joel Embiid, 4, and Anthony Davis, 5. That one's the only quite shocker. And you got Domantas Sabonis, 6. Those 2 are a little bit out, but that's why I said the bigs get rewarded in this statistic a little bit based off the rebounding, finishing possessions, the defensive numbers really help sway that. After that guy, Domantas Sabonis, you get Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson. That is the category that he's been hanging around with. Kawhi Leonard shows up. Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, James Harden, who's been a monster even though no one wants to admit it. Devin Booker. They're all after Brunson. They're all in that same rank right there. It's incredible stuff. So we had arguments on social media. We had Becky Hammon and Perk going at it on ESPN about, is Jalen Brunson a 1? Is he good enough to be the best player on a team? Right now, he absolutely is. He's absolutely a number 1 in this NBA. And he absolutely is a top 3 minimum point guard in the Eastern Conference. I'd say probably number 2 behind only Tyrese Halliburton, who some of his numbers are because he's missed a bunch of games. And right now, he's a few games away from not qualifying for postseason awards, which could align Jalen Brunson for an All-NBA season, which should put Jalen Brunson in for an All-NBA season. And obviously, he's going to be an All-Star. So the next time you hear someone try to poo-poo what the Knicks are doing right now, I want to let you know that Jalen Brunson and this squad, Dante DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hartenstein, OG Anunoby, is absolutely a contender in the Eastern Conference. And it's not a fluke. It's not luck. It's not any of these things that people want to do to crap on the Knicks. This is not that franchise. This is not that team. This team deserves to be in the conversation. And everything you look up, go on Basketball Reference, NBA.com, ESPN, go try to find a hole. They don't assist that much. That's possibly a problem. Possibly. Hasn't really stopped them yet. Their offensive rating is great. Their defensive rating is great. Yeah, that's about it. I looked for it. I checked them all the stats. The only thing that I found that's a hardcore negative is that they're pretty low in the league in assists per game, assist, whatever. Their assist to turnover is actually decent. That's it. Their 3-point percentages are good. Their free throw rates are decent. Their opponent free throw rates are fantastic. They're not fouling people by the rim. They're not giving away many free buckets. One of the best in the league. They're finishing possessions on defense with rebounds. They are giving extra possessions on offense with offensive rebounds. You got everything you want from this team. And when it comes playoff time, and we see the Sixers, we see the Bucks, we see the Magic, the Heat, the Pacers, the Cavs, you best believe the Knicks are right there, if not better. Locking that 3 seed gives them the ticket to be an Eastern Conference final team this year. And once you get there, who knows what happens? We've seen teams do it. We've seen the Heat in 2 finals past 5 years. We've seen the old version of the Celtics making conference finals when they weren't supposed to be there yet either. That Celtics team now is different. Hands up. It's exciting stuff, man. Here's the Knicks' upcoming schedule before we move on to some football talk here, as my mouse decides not to work. But upcoming through the end of February, and obviously we'll wait and hear more about Julius Randle, but I just wanted to look at February. They have 12 games. 7 against teams above 500, 5 against teams below. Here are the games above. Pacers, Mavs, Pacers. Magic, Sixers, Celtics, Pelicans. Those games, those 7 games, are paramount to prove what I just talked about. To say that everything I just said wasn't BS, wasn't baloney. And we'll have the little bit thing to fall back on here. Oh, Randall's hurt. He's not in. They're not at full strength. I don't care. They can beat the Pacers. They can beat the Mavs. They should beat the Magic. They can compete with the Sixers without Randle. The Celtics, we'll see. Maybe they can, given night. They've slowed down here and there. and the Pelicans are a really good team out west. Those matchups, man, those are big in February. Is Brunson going to show up? He will. Is OG going to give them that dimension they didn't have when they played Boston in the past, when they played the Mavs earlier in the year? Actually, they played the Mavs more recently, but with OG, but nonetheless. When they played the Pacers earlier in the year, absolutely. I look forward to it. The games up against teams below 500, some tough ones still mixed in here as well. You got the Lakers, Grizzlies, Rockets, Pistons, and Warriors. We know the Lakers and Warriors are definitely not gimmies, but the way the Knicks play, the consistency that they have from an effort perspective, from an execution perspective, you expect them to continue their great record against teams below 500. 12 games in February. I wouldn't expect it to go quite like January, but I would be shocked if they don't win 4 out of those 7 games against teams above 500, even without Randle. So we'll see where they end up. Subway Sports Talk, Pete Kennedy, right here on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen. I appreciate you all the same. And before I say goodbye, I do have one more thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the NFL. So obviously we have the Super Bowl scheduled for a week and a half from now, where the Chiefs take on the 49ers in Las Vegas, and we're going to talk about that a whole lot next week. I don't know about you guys, but Super Bowl to me, this first week leading up to the Pro Bowl, I kind of don't think about it. It like doesn't exist to me. A lot of people still tweeting about Taylor Swift. I don't know. Doesn't really matter to me at all, right? I'm fine with it. And there's some people who pretend to be fine with Taylor Swift and then just constantly talk about it, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. But I'm telling you, don't bother me none. I don't see her on my screen and cringe and freak out like so many people do. I think that's weird. It is what it is. So that's why I'm not going to talk about the Super Bowl right now, because we got all next week to go through the props and the picks and the parlays and the touchdown scorers and the game breakdown and who we think's going to do this and that and everything, right? We'll be back with Pat Boyle, Cody O'Connor next week. Going to be a great time. Right now, I want to talk about what happened last week a little bit, and not even too specifically about the game or the games that happened, but the way NFL fans treat quarterbacks in the NFL. And this is not new. This is not a secret, but it's something that bothers me. And maybe it shouldn't. Maybe it's because I have a personal liking for the guy who's currently being crapped upon, and that's Lamar Jackson. I root for him. I like him a lot. I love watching him play. I think he has a great attitude. I think he does all the right things. I think he says all the right things. Big fan of Lamar. Okay, so I'll throw that bias out there. You take that for what it's worth. But I try, and I think I do a good job here, if you spend time with Subway Sports Talk, of trying to be unbiased and trying to treat things properly and taking away bias, right? Objective. I try to be objective. And one thing that really pisses me off is when people constantly just move goalposts, change the criteria for whatever they call approval, and then crap on people for success. It really blows my mind. It's the classic Michael Jordan and LeBron argument. Now, I still think Michael Jordan's the GOAT, but the one argument that I often favor LeBron James with is people act like 6-0 is so impressive, which it is. It's a phenomenal number for Michael Jordan, the best that you can imagine for a player like him. Except all those other years where he didn't make the finals. So the goalpost that you create, you fans who like to call people frauds, you fans who tell people that they suck for making it to the top of the mountain and then getting knocked off. When there are people who would wish, who would scratch, claw, cheat, and steal to get to where some of these other guys have been. Again, LeBron, MJ. MJ's got more titles. That kind of clears it, right? But we're gonna give MJ credit for 6-0, and we're gonna take away credit from LeBron for making it further more frequently? Do you understand how that doesn't make sense? LeBron has gone to the further point of the season more frequently. He's had more seasons of success. He didn't win as many titles, so I get it. That's why it's the trump card, right? And this is not one-to-one to the NFL. But you can't say that if MJ was 6-10 in the finals, that's not more impressive than 6-0. Because those other 4 seasons, he didn't make it. He didn't get to the end of the mountain. He didn't get to the top. And that's a good thing for his resume? I don't subscribe to that. I'm sorry. Making it further every year is the best possible way to go about your season and your career. It seems dumb to say out loud because it should be obvious. But people like to take somebody at their highest and push them as far back down to their lowest as they possibly can. If you ask people after Lamar's lackluster performance against the Chiefs in the conference championship where they rank him, a lot of people would rank him, kick him down the list to 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, well, he can't win in the playoffs. He's done. Put him at 10. Put him at 12. He's not even a winner. What? Name the quarterbacks. Let me ask you this, listeners. Do you know how many active quarterbacks are Super Bowl champions? The reason I ask the question is because the way people talk about the people who lose in Super Bowls, lose in conference championships, and lose in heartbreaking fashion in the playoffs is like they suck and they deserve to be ranked 14th in the rankings for quarterbacks. You know how many active quarterbacks have won Super Bowls? I'll tell you. 5. 3 of them, irrelevant. The most relevant of them all right now is Joe Flacco, who was on a couch until the middle of the year. And yeah, he had some moments, but guess what? Crashed and burned. I don't even care about Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson in this conversation. They hardly count to me. Now, Nick Foles might be on a roster, but he doesn't count either. Right now, it's Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford. That's it. The 2 previous Super Bowl winners who are active, who still play near or at the peak of their powers. Stafford's near the peak of his powers, and Mahomes is obviously at the peak of his powers. Every other quarterback, based off the average Twitter user, the average schmo in every group chat across America, every other quarterback is a failure and sucks and is a fraud. I hate that line of thinking. Because you're the 3rd best quarterback in the league and you're a fraud? You're a top 5 quarterback in the league and you suck? That's not the right way to look at things, people. By your goalpost, by your calculations of success, there are 2 relevant quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and possibly 3 if Brock Purdy can take down Patrick Mahomes next week. And guess what? You still won't give Brock Purdy credit. So what do you want? Do you only want to root for a quarterback who wins with the worst receivers possible? Do you only want to kick down quarterbacks who make it to the furthest point before failing? What are we doing here? Lamar Jackson is without a doubt, at minimum, the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. I put him at 4. And maybe you do too. And maybe that's not good enough for you. Maybe a guy who people didn't know would have any success in this league is on his way to his 2nd MVP, just made his 1st conference championship, making 1 step further in his career. Maybe that's not good enough for you. Your quarterback probably sucks on your team. You should kill to have Lamar Jackson to be your quarterback unless you're a fan of the Chiefs, by this calculation, the Rams, or I'd say personally, the Bengals or Bills. If you ask me my honest opinion, it's Mahomes number 1 without a doubt. I'll put Joe Burrow number 2, Josh Allen 3, Lamar Jackson 4. Does Lamar Jackson get any credit for making it to the conference championship? Does Josh Allen get any credit for making it to conference championships in his past? For putting this team on his back? For defenses on his side, on his team, constantly dealing with injuries this year? Nah, he can't win the big game. He fell to Mahomes again. He sucks. Josh Allen's never going to win. Wow. That's the way people treat quarterbacks right now. The way people talk about quarterbacks, you would think that there's 10 active quarterbacks in the league who have won Super Bowls. There are 2 relevant quarterbacks who have won Super Bowls, and Jets fans, relax. we'll see if Aaron Rodgers is relevant. Currently, irrelevant. Russell Wilson, irrelevant. Joe Flacco, good year, fun year, irrelevant. They'll move on to a new quarterback the second they get a chance. And if Deshaun Watson looks anything like the old Deshaun Watson, Flacco will be back on the couch. Okay? Mahomes and Stafford, based off you guys, your opinions, your goalposts, your standard of success, are the only quarterbacks worth anything in this league. That's how I look at it when I see people saying, Josh Allen sucks. Lamar Jackson sucks. He's a fraud. He'll never win. Everyone's a loser until they win. Very rare, very, very rare is it we see a Mahomes or Brady win so early in their career and win, right? Even Russell Wilson, who had one of the best starts to a career that you could remember in this century, right? In the 21st century. He didn't win in year 1, year 2. He won in what, year 4 with one of the best defenses of the decade before losing to a Super Bowl and then never getting back. But Russell Wilson got that one with the best run game and the best defense, and he is just ingratiated forever. Russell Wilson made it. He never got an MVP vote. Lamar sucks. He's a fraud. He'll never win. He just made it as far as he ever has in his career. We can't look at that as a positive. Yes, he fell on his face a little bit. Yes, he made some big mistakes. Most quarterbacks do. In fact, I'd say most quarterbacks don't get the chance to because they don't sniff what Lamar is. They don't sniff what Josh Allen is. And Joe Burrow, because he made that Super Bowl, Joe Burrow, because he's so freaking cool, he lives above it a little bit. He don't get the hate. He just got hurt this year, right? He don't really get that hate. That's fine. He's beating Mahomes. He got that. I give it to him. I'm here with you. But let's not pretend like every quarterback after Mahomes and Burrow in the NFL sucks and is a fraud. It's not how it works. Subway Sports Talk. Pete Kennedy is here. Thank you so much for listening as always. Subway Sports Talk is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, also on social media at Subway Sports Talk, the Instagram, TikTok. We have some fun on there. We get some takes off. We have some good debates. We have some healthy debates. We have some unhealthy debates. And that's what it's all about. All right. So Pete Kennedy, follow me on my personal at Pete Kennedy 2Ys and at Subway Sports Talk on the rest of it. That's all I got. We'll talk to you later in the week. We're going to try to get a good buddy of mine on to talk some more hoops, talk a little NFL, talk a little this and a little that. And hopefully we get that figured out. Come out maybe on Thursday as opposed to Friday this week, but next week we'll be back to a regular pod and then a picks, Super Bowl specific picks pod, which I'm excited about. We got some announcements for that as well. So that's what we got. Subway Sports Talk. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.